Well, welcome to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King, and this is Extra 106.3. And this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings, but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. And you are being brought into another candidate conversation series. If you've been following the show or listening to the show, then you know that we have done quite a few of these. And these are my favorite interviews because you know how much I believe that our local races matter so much more in so many cases than federal. Reason being, it's because the decisions that are made on the local level will impact you probably much faster. As not only that, but you're going to get to know the person, and you should get to know, if you haven't already, the person who's making those decisions. So the whole point of candidate conversations is so that we can have some candid discussions with these candidates in order to help you better understand them. So like always, we are going to talk a lot about their candidacy, what they're doing. And I'm saying there because I haven't announced just yet who we're interviewing. However, we're going to get into all of that, and then we'll end it on a fun game of Would You Rather, which is just so that you can connect with them on a more personal level. So who is our guest today? I am super, super, super excited because for the first time, I get to interview someone that I can vote for. So while I have been interviewing so many other people from all across the state as it relates to their local races, Mr. Keith Gettmann is running in my district, and I am so excited to vote for him. Probably be doing that in the next couple of days, early next week, so I can make sure I get that out of the way. But just a little bit about him on a brief level, and his bio is always going to be in the description box if you are watching on YouTube. If you're listening on the radio, you can always go to YouTube and see what he looks like, watch this entire video all over again, and you can get more information about him. Just remember that I always love it. It's free for you. It's great for me to like, comment, or share. So if you're watching, please, if you haven't subscribed, get subscribed and like, comment, and share. Okay, Keith, can I call you? Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Janelle King Show. For those who are watching, as a brief introduction, because like I said, the bio has everything else. Mr. Keith Gettmann is running for our Georgia State House seat and here in District 51, which encompasses a little bit of everything, I think. But I definitely know it has Sandy Springs. I believe it's a little bit of Dunwoody, right?
No, it's actually the east side of Roswell, the northern part of Sandy Springs, and then a smidgen of Johns Creek.
Got it.
Inside of there's some Dunwoody Alpharetta addresses, but it's pretty much those geographic areas.
Perfect. Well, I am so excited to have this conversation because you will be directly representing me. Welcome to the show. Let's just get started with some basic things, right? Who is Keith Gettmann? If you were asked that question, how would you describe yourself?
Well, that's a great question. I was born in Milledgeville, Georgia. I grew up there. My dad was a chief petty officer and fought in World War II and Korea and Vietnam, Bay of Pigs. My wife, Sherry, grew up there as well. I was one of the first children in our family that actually pursued a collegiate career. And I went to Georgia Tech. Sherry went to Georgia Tech. And once we graduated, what we did is settle down in Atlanta. We raised 4 children. We now have 10 grandchildren. They all live within 10 or 15 miles of us, and we're keeping grandchildren all the time. And big announcement, number 11 is in the hangar and will be born March.
Oh, wow.
And inside of that, I will say, I can really relate to the American dream because I grew up in government subsidized housing in Milledgeville. I didn't know that at the time until I graduated, and then I found out, we used FHA 235 financing, and through the process of going to college, we've been able to build a successful life, and now we're at that point where we want to third and get back. Sure.
So, what would you say is the reason why providing the American dream to others through service is important to you?
Well, like I said, I lived in subsidized housing. A TV wasn't normal in my household. You know, we had rotary dial phones and stuff. And then I remember as a kid dreaming, and I thought about having this house up on a hill and a color TV, and there was this moment in my life when we were living in Dunwoody. I remember being down at the bottom of the yard, and I looked up and I thought, wow, that's the house that I had in my dream, you know, that the Lord had me dreaming about. And so it was a goosebump moment. And I hope everyone has a chance to share that kind of experience and just, you know, see their dreams and visions come along.
You know, I remember growing up, it was a dream for me to live in a home with hardwood floors, you know. I remember that as a kid, just like, I always loved high heels. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to live in a house with hardwood floors. I'm grateful to have achieved that. But, you know, to your point, you do want that for everybody. And it starts with good policy. So
Yeah.
let's talk about some policy. What are some concerns that you're hearing from the voters as you are out there campaigning?
Oh, well, of course, freedom of speech is at the forefront. I think all of our constituents are tired of being censored. I think everybody, whether they're on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever, they've all experienced some, you know, negative feedback on that, been turned off for some reason or another. Then, you know, the big proverbial question is, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago?
Yeah.
Or not? I remember going to the Publix down the street, and we were going to make a casserole, and it needed some soup. And I went to buy cream of chicken soup, and it was like $2 a can. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, it used to be like 50 cents a can. So there's that. And then our schools are just, as we all know, have not been safe, and we're not teaching basic civics. I'm one of those that grew up having read the Constitution, and I just assumed that my own children understood that. And then we go into this political season, and they haven't. So I'm having to back up and say, okay, you know, representation from the bottom up. That's something that we really want to push.
That's great. So let's dive into your candidacy a little bit. Actually, before that, I want to get your take on how do you feel about the current election season? I mean, we are days away from the 2024 presidential election, and we have some interesting candidates, to say the least. I think I saw Kamala's CNN town hall, and you know, it's just more non-answers, more blaming President Trump. But that's just my take. I'm not putting words in your mouth. But as it relates to issues on the federal level, or issues as a country, what are some key issues that stand out to you, particularly that's helping to drive how you are campaigning?
Well, for sure, the border. I mean, everything is tangential to the border, and inside of that is the child trafficking. That is the thing that's biggest and nearest to my heart. And I hope to have the opportunity to work with Governor Kemp's wife, Marty, because he's got a big push on that. 10 grandchildren, I'm sorry. Just, you know, you just think about if that happened to one of your grandchildren, it's just a terrible thought. So the border, inflation, wars. You know, I'm an old-fashioned Republican, and I remember back when we started bombing every country, I thought that was the right thing to do. And when Trump left office and he kept saying, I am the only president that never has gotten us into a war, I had to pause and say, no, wait a minute, I must have missed something.
Mm.
And I started looking into things, and I realized, yeah, the military-industrial complex is alive and well.
Hmm.
We don't need to be sending our young men and women off to war all the time. We need to protect our boundaries, like the Constitution says, and protect our citizens.
Absolutely. Speaking of the Constitution, us being a constitutional republic,
Yeah.
sometimes I call us a representative republic, but it kind of goes hand in hand. What would you say, as I know when I looked at your website, you talked a lot about restoring power back to the people.
Yeah.
And that is something that's dear to my heart as well, particularly since I've been on the state election board. It has been a fight to restore the power back to the people and out of the hands of judges and all these, the bureaucrats and all that stuff. So what does that mean to you, restoring the power back to the people?
Well, that's great. When I was a young teenager, I actually watched the Kennedy Camelot season, and I remember when Kennedy was assassinated, it just rocked my world. And out of that, I was more focused on the federal level for years and years and years. And then probably 10 or 15 years ago, I started looking at the overreach of the federal government and the CDC and the FDA and the Department of Justice. And, you go through all the three-letter agencies, and I just said something's upside down. So I went back to read the Constitution, and it's like Shazam. I'm reminded it's we, the people, that send representatives up. It was the states that organized a more perfect union, and I recalibrated my own inner thoughts about what was going on, and I realized local government is really the stronghold of our nation.
Oh man, that's great. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about your race, but let's first start with, why are you running for office? It seems like you have a wonderful life. You have a beautiful family. Why do this?
Well, thank you. I am a person of faith, and I have been involved in local politics, going and being a poll watcher and things like that. And March 3rd, I was sitting in church, and our pastor was talking out of Isaiah and said, the government shall rest on his shoulder, and of that government there shall be no end. And I was sitting there thinking about it, and I don't mean to go too far out of the edge, but I heard the Lord say, Keith, your mantle is going to be the mountain of government. And I thought, okay. And then the next day I was thinking about that, and I said, well, I'm involved. There's got to be something else. And so I literally said, Lord, if you'll just have somebody call me and ask me to do something, I'll just use that as your directive to move forward. Well, the next day, 5 o'clock, March 5th, I got a call from the Republican Party of Fulton County saying, hey, Keith, what you doing? I said, well, I'm on my computer. I'm checking things out. Well, have you given a thought about running as a state rep? I said, no. And they said, well, there's a Democrat incumbent, and we want to run. Well, I got goosebumps on my arm. I thought, Lord, I was just joking about calling. And here you had somebody call. So that was March 5th, and I think March 7th, we were down at the Capitol filing the papers. And
wow.
Here we are.
You talk about divine appointment, right?
Yeah, it is a divine appointment, for sure. And this whole process really centers around my faith.
Yeah.
I want to align our legislative process with the will of God. And that's just me.
Well, they say when the righteous are in rule, the people rejoice. And
Proverbs 29:2.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
Yes.
Proverbs 29:2. I love that scripture because I believe that 100%. And look, talking about faith, talking about God, my listeners they are not shy about that. They know I talk about it all the time on all my shows. I probably bring up God at least once on all my shows. So,
well, the next sentence says, and when the wicked rule, the people groan.
And aren't they groaning?
There's a lot of groaning going on right now. Yeah, for sure.
I know that's a great point. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that you feel like God called you, not feel, but you heard that God called you to run for office. You threw that fleece out there, and you got the phone call, and now you've already went to the Capitol. You're ready to rock and roll. You've been campaigning. What have you learned about our political process, having been campaigning now, since announcing and putting yourself out there?
Well, the first thing I learned is as I reached out to build a base of people to help, I wound up with 40 self-appointed advisors that, everybody had an opinion as to how things were supposed to go. And it was not always homogeneous in opinion. So I had to first learn how to receive people's cares and concerns and process it, and then be able to respond back to them with kind of a majority opinion as to what everybody is saying. So that was the first thing. And then on the Republican side, I realized that we did not have the organizational structure that the Democrats had for a season of time. We're truly volunteers, whereas the Democrats, if I can say this, it seems like they've had a bunch of billionaires help them out, pump money in, and they have a lot of structure in place. So we're pulling together as a cohesive group to put all of our money in the same basket to try and get an organizational structure that rivals what they have. And I think we've arrived there at this juncture. Yeah.
That's great. It's pretty much grassroots. And, it's funny. My husband, when he ran for office, the advice he got was that you're going to get 5,000 pieces of information, advice, instructions, he said, and from 5,000 different people.
Yes.
So be prepared. Well, thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. What are some key issues or topics that you wish to address should you be elected?
Well, outside of the obvious things of lowering taxes, which I've always been an advocate of that. I'm from the Reagan years, and as you lower taxes, you find economies picking up. But some of the things that have really been a surprise to me are things like the elderly have really been scammed a lot. So when I run into my constituents, they are talking about how their parents have lost money and due to scamming. And so I think we need to address that. And I've been talking to some of the representatives about that. So we would like to push some legislation in that regard. Certainly the school systems need to be strengthened structurally. So we need to take a look at safe zones and things in the school system so that when parents go off to work, they don't have to worry about their children. The governor just announced the $500 per family putback that is going to come up in 2025, and that comes out of the $16 billion surplus that we have in the state. And so we're fortunate to be a part of that. I was with him this morning, and he was talking about how we had a 10-year plan on reducing our income taxes, and we want to accelerate that. So we don't want to wait 10 years to get to the end. So we'll accelerate that. And then we want to have more incentives as far as reducing property taxes and ad valorem taxes and things of that nature.
Can we talk a little bit about you said the family putback? Because I haven't heard about that as of yet, but could you explain it a little bit about what that is to our listeners?
Yeah, 3 days ago, he and the General Assembly announced that they're going to put back to the citizens of Georgia a total of $1 billion, which is going to come out of the surplus, and it will be, and I may be slightly off on this, but I think it's $250 per individual taxpayer, or $500 for households that file jointly, and that is going to be in effect in 2025.
Okay.
So we all get a check for $500. You and Kelvin and Sherry and I. So I'm excited about it. But.
All right, that'll be some great. We'll get to go out dinner and we finally get to eat outside again. So
there you go.
Then you know,
have steak instead of salmon patties, right?
Right. Oh, salmon patties! That just took me back.
Do you remember that?
I do.
As a kid, I used to eat fried bologna sandwiches and salmon patties. And I remember that it was canned salmon, and you had those little tiny bones, the backbones that were in there, and I'd eat a salmon patty and touch on it. When I graduated from high school and went off to college, I swore that I was never, ever going to eat another salmon patty, and I haven't. Now I get grilled salmon, but not
right.
salmon.
This was actually another sweet moment. So my grandmother passed away a few years ago, and so it's still kind of new, kind of fresh. And my mom was the only child, and she watches this. So hey, Mom. And but the other day, the nickname my grandmother had for me was Nellie, and a young woman introduced me as I spoke, and her name was Nellie. And so that was a moment. And then salmon croquettes and salmon patties was something she made for us. So you bringing that up, it's like another moment of me remembering my grandmother. It was just a sweet moment, and I appreciate that, even though you didn't know. No, that was a sweet moment. Okay, so as we are continuing to talk more about your policies and your platforms, what are some things that you have seen either take place or you've heard about that as it relates to our state house that, you want to either be a part of or clean up?
Well, with the past 4 years that we've had and all the trauma that's taken place, one of the things that I was actually shell-shocked at finding out is 1 out of every 4 citizens in Georgia experience some type of emotional trauma or addiction or whatever. And so there is a national 988 number, like we have the 911 number. And we have, through the legislative process, begun to fund that, and we're given that parallel emphasis to 911. So if there's a crisis in the family, you can dial 988, and you will receive the same amount of attention as you would for 911. So we're starting to build facilities throughout the state of Georgia to accommodate emotional trauma and addiction, which is very much needed. So that was really a surprise. And then, like I said earlier, as I was talking with constituents, it's like my mother got scammed, my grandparents got scammed. So, we really need to do something for the elderly protected.
What type of scams are we talking about? Because if there's someone listening right now that may be either affected by it or could be, what are you hearing, and how can they prevent this from happening?
Well, there are different types of scams. There are phishing scams and calls that you get. Just today or yesterday, I had 2 emails where I got an alert and my account had been hacked, and it's like, call this number. And I've learned just to delete them. But one of the things that you can do is just make sure that as a child of an elderly parent, that you stay in touch with your parents, and hopefully they will allow you to have access to their accounts, which I do for my mother. She's 96 and lives in an assisted living center. And so I just make sure that she is good.
Yeah. No, great. So let's go back to economics and the income tax. So I'm assuming we're talking, I think I saw that President Trump is talking about possibly doing away with the income tax on a federal level, but
Yes.
is this something that's happening on a state level you would like to see? And if so, what about the fair tax? How do you feel about the fair tax, if you've heard of that or know about it?
I have heard the fair tax, and one thing that's very logical to me is whether you call it the fair tax or consumption tax or whatever. Personally, I would much prefer to pay tax on what I consume versus on what I earn. So there's got to be some discussion along that line. We know that Tennessee and Florida both have zero income tax, and so our state finds itself in a competitive environment trying to recruit talent, trying to keep our own college graduates here and not going up to Nashville or down to Jacksonville, wherever. And so we need to take a look at reducing the income tax more. And then the other thing, my background's consumer finance. And I've known since my first job was Fannie Mae, I've known that as the housing market goes, so goes the economy. Because Janelle doesn't just go out and get a house. She goes out and buys the draperies, and Kelvin gets a lawnmower, and go through the whole process, and the economy just booms off the housing. So we've got to make sure that we get our interest rates down, that we get affordable underwriting guidelines for the youth, especially, to find themselves with the American dream and owning a house instead of renting an apartment.
So, it's funny. You mentioned, man, I think it's slipping my mind, but there was something you mentioned about just housing. Are you hearing about corporations purchasing houses in this area, in this district, and then renting them rather than selling them to people? Have you heard about that?
Oh, absolutely. BlackRock, Vanguard are notorious, infamous for that. In my third child, Luke's neighborhood, I think he said about 2/3 of the homes are owned by BlackRock, and they're renting them out. So it's something that we definitely need to have some legislation out about that has, if you want to buy and do a run a house thing, we need to have some maximum levels that you can have in any geographic district or neighborhood.
Yeah. I mean, it's so important, because when you start talking about removing home ownership, there are so many things that come along with that. And what I'm noticing is that particularly when Democrats talk about affordable housing, they typically are talking about renting, not home ownership. And even though Kamala is throwing this wild economic plan out there to to give $25,000 to first-time homeowners in the form of a tax credit, it's just going to increase the cost of housing. And it really doesn't matter if corporations are buying up these homes, right? So, so when it comes to affordable housing, and I know your district is very different than some other districts as it relates to affordability and some of our economic concerns, but high density areas is not what we want to see in the suburbs, right? So how do you feel about all of that?
Well, I've attended a lot of the council meetings at Sandy Springs and at Roswell, and it's been a particular issue in Roswell where 3 or 4 months ago, they finally passed a resolution, if that's the right term, that where you have high density housing, you have to have a minimum of 51% commercial space mixed in. So you can't just go in and build 1,000 homes, bring 1,000 homeowners in without having infrastructure to support it. And I think that's the way that we need to go forward.
I actually like that. I haven't heard of that, but I love that. And I get excited when I hear great ideas in these interviews.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
The other thing is I'm aware that in Texas they have enterprise zones in schools where they will build school buildings where the schools are actually on the second, third, fourth floors, and they have commercial space on the first floor. And what they're doing is they're creating kind of a vocational school environment with the public school environment.
Mm-hmm.
And they're bringing the children in to work in those commercial stores, teaching them to budget, to sell, to stock. And so they're really becoming entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs through that process. And I'd like to see us do a little bit of discovery along those lines with our school system.
I love that more so. And I'm glad you brought up the school systems, because I wanted to start talking about trades and something I read. But before that, I love that idea, because what I'm noticing is when I talk to young people is that they have an entrepreneurial spirit, right? They want to, and I say young people, I know I'm part of that, but technically I'm not anymore. I mean, I'm talking about the Gen Zers who are now, millennials, we're now fading out, but
yeah.
to the Gen Zers. But what I've noticed as a business owner is that there's a stark difference between having an idea, having a vision, and actually conducting business.
Right.
And when you don't have those skills that teaches you about having to make payroll and responsibility of forecasting and all of that stuff, it's just an idea, you have an expensive hobby. So I really like that. Now, education. I know we have a school superintendent, we have school boards and all of that. But from your position, there's a lot that you can do to help strengthen our educational system. And I personally am someone who believes in trade. And I read an article recently that said that the up and coming new millionaire class are going to be electricians, plumbers, and those who are in trade. And right. I know being in construction that is totally, the case. But what do you think about that? Do you agree?
Well, I mean, if you think about AI, the ironic thing is it's computer programmers creating AI, and AI in and of itself is going to replace the computer programs. Maybe you call that justice. I don't know, but I agree. Our generations have lost the ability to repair a commode, to fix a car, to do these types of things, and that is something that AI cannot replace. I've got a good friend who's really good at web design, and he just bought a insulation company where he's putting insulation up in the attic. And I remember asking him, he said, "Grant, that's kind of an odd business to buy." And he said, "Can AI replace, putting insulation up in people's attics?" I said, "No." He said, "That's the reason I bought it." So to your point, having a trade is going to be crucial for coming generations. Yeah.
Before we go into the fun segment, I have to talk about healthcare a little bit, because that is something that's always on the table. It's always a topic of discussion, and the expansion of Medicaid for all. And I've heard several different perspectives on this. Personally, I do think that there is, we have a crisis in our healthcare system. But I also think that we have a crisis in our Medicaid system. When you consider the fact that we have around 60 million people in America on this system, this government healthcare system, and we only have around 1.1 million physicians. I mean, how can you adequately provide a great healthcare experience when you have 10 minutes between patients as doctors? So that kind of goes back to the trade and needing to have more doctors. But where do you stand on healthcare and possibly the expansion of Medicaid?
That's a great question. First of all, we need competitive environment. I happen to be one of those that's on Medicare. And one of the things that's interesting about Medicare is you have Plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and inside of each one of those plans is an identical structure that has to be given to the patient. And so I'm on Plan G, and I am able to go in and say, well, Company A charges $100 a month, Company B charges $400 a month, and it's literally the same care that you have. So you need to open up the care to the medical profession and to the insurance companies and just make it a competitive environment. And if you do that, just by default, it will gravitate to the most efficient, most competitive process. So if we're going to expand Medicaid, we need to copy what we've done in Medicare to emulate that.
Oh, another great point. Another great point. Thank you.
Yeah.
So before we go on a break, we'll go to the next break, and then we come back. We're going to have the fun "Would You Rather" segment, and then we'll have Mr. Gettmann close on just his message to voters as we are coming up on this election day. But before that, you're going into the House. There's a couple of hundred other people that's going to be there. Well, I think it's a couple of, maybe 100, a little bit over, but there's a lot of people. You're one vote, and we all have a lot of ideas, and I know there's a lot of things you want to get done. But what is one priority item where you feel that if I can go in there and if I can just get this done when I'm first elected, I will be excited and happy? What is that one priority item?
Well, for sure, it's going to be to make our neighborhoods and schools safe. Because I remember the Lord one time said, Keith, fathers are supposed to protect and provide, and mothers nurture and encourage. And I came back and I said, protect and provide. Well, what he said, you got to protect them first, because if you don't protect them, there's nothing to provide. And I thought, wow, I wish I'd thought of that. And so we've got to protect our citizens first, which the First Amendment, Second Amendment, those are all protections for it. And then the second thing is we need a free economy where entrepreneurs and the current generation can start up businesses and they can afford to do it. They're not taxed to death and they're not regulated to death. So if you give people safety and you provide an economic environment that they can flourish in, the rest of it just comes along.
Makes a lot of sense. I love it. And I totally agree. I remember going to school, and I don't remember a time where I woke up feeling like I would be harmed in some physical way while I'm at school. And the fact that we have so many young people that feel that way, it's just disheartening. It's really sad. I hate that we're at that point, but I do think mental health plays a major role in that. And so I know you mentioned the trauma and addiction as well, but would you agree that mental health is something that is playing a major role in why we're not seeing a lot of safety in our communities?
Yeah, I mean, my people suffer for lack of vision, right? If they don't have hope for tomorrow, then there's going to be a tangential impact on their emotional stability. I mean, within my own household, my grandchildren have gone to my children at times and said, I'm not sure I want to go to school tomorrow. They saw something on TV about, one of the school shootings, and they're afraid to go. And that's, no 6, 7, 8-year-old needs to worry about being shot in school. So we just got to get that fixed. So.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining the show. Please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I upload new content. Now back to the discussion. This portion of the show is dedicated to getting to know him as a person. I always mention how this is my mother's absolute favorite segment, because she thinks it's so much fun, because it does help to humanize our candidates. I think when you're out there campaigning, people immediately make you a politician, but they don't see the fun side. So these questions are very fun, very lighthearted, nothing heavy. So I'm going to ask you, would you rather have one option or the other option? And then you can tell me what you wish. So you ready?
Yes.
All right. Would you rather have a free lifetime supply of your favorite beverage or a free meal at your favorite restaurant once a week?
Wow. Well, I love to eat. Having said that, I just lost 40 pounds. So I probably should not say at my favorite restaurant once a week, but that for sure, I'd much rather eat than drink Coca-Cola or whatever. So for sure, the food at the favorite restaurant once a week.
Free meal at your favorite restaurant. Awesome. Awesome. I don't know. I think I don't know. If I could have a lifetime supply of bourbon, I think I'll be happy,
Well, that's how I lost weight is I got on the wagon. So you can't lose weight and keep drinking. So yeah.
No, you cannot. Yeah. You cannot. All right, next question. Would you rather travel back in time to meet your younger self or forward in time to meet your future self?
Oh, for sure. I'd like to go back in time.
Really?
As an individual, I can think about coulda, shoulda, woulda, and there are things that I know today that if I could go back and convince my younger self to take more seriously. For example, I went to Georgia Tech, and I spent a lot of time doing the frat club thing and going to football games, and I didn't study as much as I should have. And I really, really wish that I had studied hard and learned more. So yeah, I'd like to go back in time for sure. Yeah.
That's fun. That's fun. Me too. I feel like I'm turning 40 this year, and I'm realizing times where I'm like, man, I wish I hadn't done that. So I would like to go back in time and talk to my younger self and get her together. Okay. Would you rather go fishing every weekend or play golf every weekend?
I'd rather go fishing every weekend because I can eat the fish. If I go golfing every weekend, I get frustrated because I slice the ball terribly, and I'd come away emotionally disturbed playing golf. So fishing and eating would be the choice for sure.
Having done both of these, I don't know. I don't think I want to do either one actually, because they're both hard for me. But I guess fishing, you can always sit pier fishing because I don't have to worry about getting sick. All right. Would you rather have a personal chef or a personal driver?
Oh, personal chef. Let's go back to the eating thing. I mean, God.
Well, that's right.
Well, think about how many times you gather with family around the dinner table. I mean, that is where you get to know one another. So food, breaking bread with your family is absolutely crucial. And so, I would love to have a chef, maybe from Seasons 52, where they make great food and it's only 500 calories and you can just eat all you want without gaining weight.
I love it. Last, would you rather? And then I would love it if you could close with just your message to voters that, final message, final push as we're getting close to Election Day. So last question, very simple. Would you rather spend a month on a tropical beach or in a cozy cabin in the mountains?
Well, I love my wife. We've been married 50 years, and I can envision she and I being on a private beach somewhere, and I'm, winking at her the whole time. So for sure, out on the beach and being with my wife. Yeah.
I love that. After 50 years, you're still would rather travel with your wife. I love it. If you're listening, this will be us. Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Gettmann. Yes, can you please share your final word to voters as we're getting close to Election Day?
Well, I remember coming out of the Jimmy Carter years where you had what was called the misery index, probably before you were born. I mean, you had 18% inflation, 18% interest rates, and Reagan came in, and one of the things that he said is it's going to be a good morning in America once again. And I love that about Trump and the MAGA emphasis about we need to have hope again. So I think we need to instill hope in people and say, you don't have to depend on somebody else. You can be an entrepreneur yourself. But we're gonna give you the infrastructure and the support, and we want you to dream and be the person that you want to be, and raise your family and just enjoy life. So yeah, it's going to be a new day in America soon, and I'm looking.
Oh man, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Keith. And we are so happy to have you. As I stated before, if you want to know more about him or get in touch with him, I have everything in the description box on my YouTube page. Otherwise, can you share what your website is so that people can follow you, donate,
Yes.
support?
It's Keith, K-E-I-T-H, F-O-R, Georgia, G-A, so that's all one word, .com. And I know you kept talking about your mom, so Janelle's mom, I hope you enjoy this interview, and love to meet you sometime.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm sure she would love that. I greatly appreciate it. I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate how detailed oriented you are as it relates to being able to accomplish some of these things that are they're pressing to us. I feel like you have a good understanding of what needs to be done. I feel confident in voting for you. I'm excited to vote for you. I am urging everyone, particularly those who live in House District 51, to please consider voting for Mr. Keith Gettmann. We are blessed to have an option that is not only someone who understands the importance of service, but also allows their faith to lead them and guide them. You have no idea how important that is when we're talking about leadership. And I'm so grateful that I get to have that and have that option in this upcoming election. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching. As I always say, please stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and never stop seeking the truth. We'll see you next week.